The Sandringham agreement is still on the official royal website. You can go and read it right now. It has been there since January 2020, and it says in plain language that the Sussexes will not use their HRH titles, not publicly, not commercially, not in any context. That was the deal. Both parties signed it. The late Queen approved it. 5 years later, those two words, Your Royal Highness, have appeared on Meghan's Instagram, in a gift basket sent to a podcast host, on camera, on Netflix, in Meghan's own voice. That is not a tabloid allegation. Those are 3 documented incidents, on platforms, with audiences, under a signed agreement. And a source close to Prince William has confirmed to the Daily Beast, on the record, what happens next when he becomes king. Tonight we are going through all of it. Not the gossip version, the legal and financial version, the Sandringham agreement and what it actually says. The 3 violations, each one more significant than the last. The collapse of $120 million in industry deals, the 18 staff departures, the origin story that Vanity Fair couldn't verify and her own father called embellished, and the specific legal mechanism, letters patent, that will eventually settle the entire question of what the Sussex brand is actually built on and what happens to it when that foundation is removed. Let's start with the agreement, because nothing else in this story makes sense without it.
Harry and Meghan Markle split from the royal family. They'll formally step down as senior royals March 31st.
January 2020. Meghan and Harry sit down with the late Queen Elizabeth at Sandringham and negotiate the terms of their exit from royal duties. The agreement is documented, signed, and published on the official royal website, where it still sits today. The terms are specific. The Sussexes will not use their HRH titles, not publicly, not commercially, not in any context. In return, they keep the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles. They leave with their dignity intact and their future in their own hands. That was the deal. It was written down. Both parties signed it.
When they brought in Meghan Markle and her husband, what did they do? Like a $20 million deal? And so now they're...
Fast forward to April 2025. Meghan opens Instagram and posts the letter from Ukraine's vice president unedited. No caption noting that the diplomatic address was a courtesy. No clarification that the title used by the sender was incorrect. Just the letter in full, the words, Your Royal Highness sitting right at the top, visible to millions of followers on a commercial social media platform. A source close to Prince William did not soften the assessment when they spoke to the Daily Beast. You'd have to be an idiot to believe she didn't know exactly what she was doing when she posted that message unedited to her stories. Another source put it plainly. Every time you think they can't make it worse, they make it worse. The deal on the HRH was a way to let them walk away with pride, and now she's using it to sell jam.
A commercial to people all over America, and it's funny to look back at it now.
But the Instagram post was not a standalone incident. If Palace Insider is giving you the full picture that other channels skip, hit the like button. It costs nothing and it helps us reach more people. Around the same time, podcast host Jaime King received a personal gift basket from Meghan, addressed using the HRH title. Not a letter from a foreign diplomat doing what diplomats do. A personal gift, sent commercially, bearing a title she had agreed in writing not to use in any context. Then there is the Netflix footage. And this one matters more than the others because it is not a letter, not a basket, not something that could be dismissed as someone else's wording. This is Meghan on camera, on a commercial streaming platform watched by tens of millions, in her own voice. When Mindy Kaling referred to her as Meghan Markle during filming, Meghan stopped her. It's so funny that you keep saying Meghan Markle. You know I'm Sussex now. A woman who signed a formal agreement not to commercially use her royal identity, correcting a celebrity into using it on Netflix. On permanent record. It cannot be walked back. It cannot be framed as a diplomatic courtesy or someone else's phrasing. The Sandringham agreement is on the official royal website. The Instagram post is documented. The gift basket is documented. The Netflix correction is on camera. Royal expert Kinsey Schofield stated it plainly. Harry and Meghan aren't supposed to use their titles for profit, but they obviously do.
She wasn't necessarily popular when life was difficult.
Privacy expert Trevor Cook went further, suggesting the royal family could pursue legal action over the commercial use of a title she had agreed not to use commercially. Lawyers have a specific term for what that creates: material misrepresentation. The foundational claim upon which a commercial arrangement was made turns out to be legally problematic. We will come back to what that means. But first, the industry has already delivered its own verdict, and the numbers are striking. Subscribe to Palace Insider and tell us in the comments, which of these 3 violations do you think was the most significant? In 2020, Netflix signed a reported $100 million deal with Harry and Meghan. The pitch was straightforward: royal access, royal storytelling, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex bringing the monarchy to a global streaming audience, and for a while, the numbers justified it. Then March 2026 arrived and Netflix officially terminated its partnership with Archewell Productions. No dramatic announcement, no public falling out, just a clean ending. Industry insiders describe the mood inside Netflix in 4 words: we're done with them.
I really liked her. I just think she's a slight social climber, I'm afraid. And when I see the way, I mean, look, at her wedding, there was only one member.
Before that, Spotify, a multi-million-dollar podcast deal that should have produced years of content. What it actually produced was 1 season. When the contract ended, Spotify executive Bill Simmons did not send a polite farewell. He went on record and called them frauds. Not a disappointment, not a creative mismatch. Frauds. That word came from inside the building. Then in April 2026, Penguin Random House, the same publisher that turned Harry's memoir into a global bestseller and had every commercial reason to stay in a productive relationship with the Sussexes, let a reported $20 million book deal quietly expire without renewal. Sources described both sides as having burned the bridge, with the publisher specifically feeling financially burned by the arrangement and by what had been delivered against what had been promised. That specific characterization, burned, not disappointed, not creatively misaligned, matters in a way that goes beyond one contract. Publishers do not enter 9-figure relationships lightly. They conduct due diligence. They assess the author's platform, the author's track record, and the author's commercial trajectory. Penguin Random House made those assessments in 2020 and arrived at a specific number. By 2026, they had arrived at a different conclusion entirely. Added up, $100 million from Netflix, gone. A multi-million Spotify contract, gone. A $20 million book deal, gone. 3 of the biggest names in their respective industries arriving at the same conclusion within months of each other. That is not a rough patch. That is not bad timing. That is a verdict. And every single one of those deals was built on the same foundation: the Sussex name, the royal identity, the Duchess brand. That was the selling point. That was what made the numbers make sense. Strip that title permanently, officially, and legally, and the commercial logic that justified every one of those contracts does not just weaken, the floor disappears.
It actually opens the door also to when William becomes king, quite reasonably stripping Harry of his title.
What remains is a lifestyle brand with a changed name, selling jam at price points that only made sense when the person selling it was the Duchess of Sussex. Now, let's talk about the foundation those deals were built on. Because before the contracts, before the streaming deals, there was a story Meghan had been telling for 20 years. She was 11 years old. She saw a Procter & Gamble commercial that said women all over America were fighting greasy pots and pans. She was outraged, so she sat down and wrote letters to Hillary Clinton, to P&G, to senators. And according to Meghan, it worked. P&G changed the commercial. Clinton personally wrote back. An 11-year-old girl changed corporate America. She told this story at the United Nations. She told it at the One Young World Summit. She told it in her Vanity Fair profile. She told it again in Colombia in 2024. For 2 decades, it was the cornerstone of her public identity. The girl who saw injustice, picked up a pen, and won. There is one problem. Vanity Fair's own fact-checkers went looking for the evidence. They went directly to P&G. They consulted advertising historians. What they found, or more precisely what they could not find, was enough for them to pull the story from the article entirely. They could not verify it. They found no evidence whatsoever that she ever received a personal reply from Hillary Clinton. No letter, no record, no confirmation from anyone at Clinton's office. Then her own father weighed in. In his 2020 documentary, Thomas Markle said on camera, "I think Meghan was part of a letter-writing campaign of sorts. The story about her single-handedly changing the ad may have been a little embellished. A letter-writing campaign, in school, as a class assignment, not a lone activist, not a girl who changed corporate America, a student doing homework." Meghan's own PR team subsequently hired journalists who chose not to include the P&G story in the official media bulletin sent to press. not because the story had aged out of relevance, but because it had become a liability to circulate. That is a specific and significant choice. It means the people paid to protect her reputation had concluded that a story she had been telling publicly for 20 years and had used to build her entire humanitarian identity was no longer safe to include in official materials.
Newspaper journalist said that William despises his brother now, so that relationship is over.
The origin story she used to earn a UN ambassadorship, the cornerstone of the entire Meghan Markle brand. Her own father called it embellished. Vanity Fair could not confirm it. Not a single person at P&G, at Clinton's office, or in advertising history could verify the letter existed. If the very first story she ever told about herself publicly cannot survive a fact check, that raises a specific and uncomfortable question about everything built on top of it. Now let's talk about the staff, because the staff numbers tell a story that PR strategy cannot rewrite. Meghan told Oprah she felt unsupported inside the institution. She positioned herself as someone the system failed to protect. It is a compelling narrative. It raises one question it never quite answers. If Meghan was the one being mistreated, why did 18 people walk out of her operation between 2020 and 2026? 18 documented departures, 3 per year on average. Not anonymous sources or tabloid speculation. People with names, with careers, with professional reputations they had every reason to protect. People who left anyway. Samantha Cohen spent 17 years working for the British royal family and was one of the most experienced palace aides the institution had, someone who understood royal service at the highest level and had the track record to prove it. She became Meghan's private secretary in 2018. The plan was for Cohen to stay 6 months, help Meghan find her footing, and hand off to a permanent replacement. She stayed 18 months, not because she wanted to extend, but because they could not find anyone willing to take the job permanently. When a replacement was finally identified, the palace flew that person to Africa, specifically to shadow Cohen on a royal tour. The replacement quit while still in Africa, before the tour was even finished. Cohen herself confirmed this in 2024, speaking to the Herald Sun. She was also one of 10 staff members formally interviewed by Buckingham Palace as part of an independent bullying investigation, a review privately funded by Queen Elizabeth herself. The findings were never made public. The changes that followed the investigation were implemented quietly, without announcement. But the specific fact that a sitting monarch chose to fund an independent investigation into her own grandson's household is not a small thing. It is the kind of action that happens only when the people with the most information and the most to lose by acknowledging a problem have concluded that the problem is real enough that it requires an official response. 18 documented departures across 6 years, 3 per year on average. Senior professionals who had worked at the highest levels of public life, who understood discretion and pressure and the particular demands of royal service. They left anyway, and the specific pattern of what they said when they did speak, carefully, after long delays, in the measured language of people who understood the gravity of going on record, is not the pattern of people who left casually. And then there is the personal pattern, because the same thing that happened inside Meghan's professional operation has been documented by people who were once among her closest friends. There is now an entry in the Urban Dictionary for what happens to people who get close to Meghan Markle. The word is markled. It means to be completely abandoned by someone after you have played a meaningful role in their life. The fact that a dictionary entry exists because the pattern is that recognizable, that consistent, that widely documented, that tells you more than any single story could. Ninaki Pretty and Meghan met at age 2. They grew up inseparable. Sleepovers, road trips, a European holiday at 15. The kind of friendship that does not need to be maintained because it simply exists underneath everything else. Pretty was Meghan's maid of honor at her first wedding to Trevor Engelson in 2011. She was there through the marriage. She was there through the divorce. 30 years of shared history. She was not invited to the royal wedding in 2018. No confrontation, no falling out, no final phone call where at least you would know what went wrong. Just silence. The particular kind of silence that is harder to process than a direct ending, because it does not give you anything to respond to. It simply removes you, cleanly and completely, without the courtesy of an explanation. When you look at the sequence of that specific relationship across 30 years, the shared childhood, the maid of honor at the first wedding, the complete absence from the second, what you are looking at is not a relationship that ended. It is a relationship that was ended by one person. Without warning, without stated reason, and without the basic acknowledgement that 30 years deserved at minimum a conversation. When Pretty eventually spoke to the press, years later, she used the specific and careful language of someone who had thought about it for a long time. I think Meghan was calculated, very calculated, in the way she handled people and relationships. She is very strategic in the way she cultivates circles of friends. Once she decides you're not part of her life, she can be very cold. Jessica Mulroney styled Meghan for years, helped her navigate the media storm of the early Harry era, was at the royal wedding, was at the baby shower, went on royal tours. Multiple sources described her as Meghan's most trusted confidant. Then in June 2020, Mulroney got into a public dispute with a black influencer. Meghan cut contact immediately. A source told Page 6 that the controversy gave Meghan the excuse she was apparently waiting for to cut Mulroney off for good. 9 years ended the moment it became a liability. And then Piers Morgan. In 2016, Meghan followed him on social media. They exchanged messages. They met for a drink in London. That same evening, she met Harry at a party. Morgan described what happened next with blunt simplicity. That was the last I ever heard from Meghan Markle. These are not people who betrayed her first and spoke second. They were left first, quietly, without explanation, without the conversation that 3 decades of friendship or 9 years of close professional confidence surely warranted. And when they finally spoke, they used the language of people who were genuinely hurt and had taken a long time to understand exactly what had happened to them. Not the language of people selling a story, the language of people who had been trying to make sense of something that did not make obvious sense, and had eventually arrived at a conclusion they were not looking for. Now, let's bring this back to where it all leads, because the personal pattern and the professional pattern point to the same place, and that place has a legal name. The Sussex brand was never really about Meghan. It was about 2 words in front of her name, Duchess of Sussex. That is what opened the doors. That is what made Netflix write a 9-figure check. That is what put her on the stage at the United Nations. Not her television resume, not her activism work, not the origin story about a letter to peanut her resume, not her activism, not the P&G story, G, and a personal reply from Hillary Clinton that her own PR team eventually stopped including in her press materials. The title, the 2 words she agreed in writing not to use commercially, and then systematically used as the commercial foundation for every major deal she entered into in the years that followed, was always borrowed. It was always conditional. And the condition was always that it could be removed. Harry was born a prince. He is the son of a king, the grandson of a queen. Whatever happens to his titles, he is constitutionally and historically part of the House of Windsor. He has a floor. Meghan Rachel Markle is from Los Angeles. Her father was a lighting director. The title Duchess of Sussex was a courtesy title given through marriage by royal prerogative because she happened to marry the right man at the right time. It was never hers by birth. It was never hers by right. It was given. And what is given by royal prerogative can be removed the same way. A source close to Prince William confirmed to the Daily Beast exactly what will happen when he becomes king. There is no way King William will stand for this. The titles will simply be removed when he is king. A way will be found. Not a threat, not palace gossip. A confirmed position stated on the record by a named source. When the letters patent is issued and the titles are removed officially and permanently, every business arrangement Meghan has entered into since 2020 faces a retroactive question. What exactly did every business partner, every retailer, every investor sign up for? What were they actually sold? Did they enter their agreements with Meghan Markle, the former actress, or with the Duchess of Sussex? An identity that, by signed agreement, was never supposed to be available for commercial use, and which will at some point no longer exist legally. That question has no comfortable answer. And unlike a bad headline, it does not fade with the next news cycle. It compounds. It accumulates. It moves from corporate strategy discussions toward the kind of conversation that eventually finds its way into legal filings. Material misrepresentation does not require a specific action to trigger it. It simply requires that the foundational claim upon which a commercial arrangement was made turns out to be legally invalid. And then someone with standing decides to ask the question in a formal setting. Tom Bauer has written 2 books on this subject, Revenge in 2022 and Betrayal in 2026, 80 sources across both books. And in all that time, across both publications, With Meghan's famously active and aggressive legal team working against him at every stage, Bauer has not faced a single successful legal challenge to either book. Not one. For a woman whose lawyers have a well-documented track record of pursuing publications that print things she contests, that silence around Bauer's specific reporting is significant in a way that goes beyond the normal observation that he is thorough. It suggests the specific documents and specific sources he is working from are solid enough that a challenge would be more dangerous for the challenger than for the author. The people who signed those documents know where they are. So does Bauer. Remove the Duchess title, and you remove the premise of every commercial arrangement she has entered into since 2020. The contracts, the brand, the products, the platform. All of it was built on an identity she agreed in writing not to use commercially, and which a future king has confirmed will be taken back, as Ever can change its name. The Jam can get a new label. The Instagram grid can be updated, but the paper trail does not change. The signed agreement does not change. The Netflix footage does not change. The 10 witnesses from the bullying investigation do not change. The 18 staff departures do not change. And if the P&G origin story, the very first story she ever told about herself publicly, the cornerstone of the entire Meghan Markle brand, could not survive a fact check at Vanity Fair and was described by her own father as a class assignment that got embellished over 20 years in front of global audiences, then what does that say about everything built on top of it? Parliament can remove a title, that is 2 words, but the biography is everything else. And if the foundation was embellished, as her own father said, then what William is preparing to take away is not just a word in front of her name. It is the last structural element holding the rest of the story together. Ninaki Pretty described it years ago, talking about something else entirely. Once she decides you're not part of her life, she can be very cold, clean, total, final. What nobody anticipated is that an institution older than any of the players in this story would eventually deploy exactly the same move. Cold, clean, total, final. The institution that Meghan spent 5 years publicly dismantling has one last move. And it is, in the precise sense of the word, the same move. No negotiation, no appeal, no reframe available. Just the quiet and permanent removal of the 2 words that made the commercial operation possible. The clock is running on the Sussex brand in a way that no Instagram strategy or product rebrand can address. The title will come off. The agreement is on the official website. The violations are documented. The legal framework that follows from all 3 of those things is not a theory. It is a process that begins when William takes the throne and does not require anyone's cooperation or consent to complete. Which part of this story do you think is the most legally significant? The title violations, the collapsed deals, or the letters patent question? Drop your analysis in the comments. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we uncover next. And if this is the kind of deep dive you came here for, like the video. It genuinely matters. Until the next one.